Giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world, Mark Twain is supposed to have said. I know because I've done it thousands of times. The latest frontier in the battle to quit smoking is the electronic cigarette, hailed by smokers and charities alike who say that it's revolutionary potential. But public health authorities aren't quite so sure. The European Union has proposed a ban on precisely the type of e-cigarettes that would-be quitters like best, the ones with the most nicotine. Both sides claim to be looking out for the public interest, but which one is right? If it looks like a cigarette and it feels like a cigarette, does that make it a health risk, like a cigarette? Electronic cigarettes have seen a surge in popularity in recent years and are now used by around 1.3 million people in the UK. They contain nicotine, but significantly fewer carcinogens than regular smokes. But concern over their long-term effects has led to calls for tighter regulation. A vote in the European Parliament last week supported a ban on e-cigarettes with a particularly high nicotine content. That provoked an outcry from an unlikely alliance of industry and anti-smoking charities who argue that e-cigarettes are helping to reduce death and disease from smoking. One consultancy has gone as far as to argue that a ban on ersatz cigarettes could cost as many as 105,000 lives a year in Europe. But they're often marketed to seem as realistic as possible. Opponents argue that they offer a convenient way for the tobacco industry to sidestep tough regulations on the advertising of real cigarettes. A quick comparison of the old and new shows a strikingly uniform message: smoking is cool. There are fears that such messages, along with the use of bright colours and exciting flavours, could encourage smoking amongst children. Well, with me here in the studio is the Times columnist and Conservative peer Matt Ridley, and in Salford is Professor Martin McKee of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. First of all, Professor McKee, are e-cigarettes unsafe?
E-cigarettes are certainly safer than the real cigarettes. Whether they're safe or not is another question.
Do you believe then that certain cigarettes which contain, e-cigarettes which contain is more than 20 mg of nicotine therefore should be banned?
Well, I think we're actually asking the wrong question. The issue is not whether or not they're safer than real cigarettes. They clearly are safer. The issue is whether or not the imagery, the advertising, the marketing of these products is essentially a way to get around the advertising ban on real cigarettes, and I and others are convinced that it is.
So there's a kind of a Trojan horse for real smoking?
Absolutely. And what we're now seeing in the United States from the latest tobacco youth survey is that the rate of use of these products by 12 to 15-year-olds is going up, whereas there's been no compensatory fall in the use of real cigarettes.
So actually it's just adding to the general smoking tally rather than removing cigarettes in favour of e-cigarettes?
No, the evidence is that smoking is going down and e-cigarettes are going up. I mean, the use of e-cigarettes quadrupled in the last year in this country, and all the evidence suggests it's now the top way of quitting cigarettes. Quitting smoking. I mean, it's the most popular way in this country for people to get off cigarettes, and that's it from a standing start within about a year.
But what about the idea that ones that are very heavy on nicotine are actually pretty harmful? I mean, they're addictive.
Nicotine is addictive, yes,
yeah.
but so is coffee. You know, coffee's addictive. People are addicted to coffee. Nicotine is not very harmful, and the NHS website says very firmly that these things are probably about 1,000 times safer than cigarettes. So these are bringing about the end of smoking.
So you don't believe in capping the amount of nicotine that should be in these cigarettes?
Well, I think the problem with capping the amount of nicotine is that it would get rid of exactly the products that people are using to quit. So the quitters are going for the strong ones, and then they're going down. I've had hundreds of emails since I started writing about this from people who moved on to strong cigarettes and then went on to weaker ones. And the evidence suggests that, e-cigarettes,
yes,
that 100,000 people or so would be at risk if they didn't have, because they wouldn't be able to quit.
You've got the e-cigarette manufacturers and the charities together saying that e-cigarettes essentially are a good thing because they're cutting the rate of heart disease and related problems all over Europe. Professor?
No, I don't think that's the case at all, because what we see is that although some people may be cutting down their cigarette consumption, if they're still having what we call dual use, so they're using real cigarettes and e-cigarettes, they're not reducing their rate of heart disease significantly. They may be reducing their long-term rate of lung cancer, but their heart disease rate will stay the same. And these things are being marketed to kids.
Yes, I was going to say marketing. Do you believe that actually, obviously we're not allowed cigarette adverts on television. Do you believe e-cigarettes should face the same advertising ban?
Absolutely, because this is essentially a way of getting around the ban. These things are flavoured with things like strawberry cake, bubble gum, candy floss. Obviously, they're being marketed to kids.
Well, to be fair, I have seen lots of kids smoking e-cigarettes. Well, lots. I've seen kids on corners smoking e-cigarettes. Is that okay?
Well, no, it's not, and it's quite right that they shouldn't be available to children. But the evidence is that among young people as well as among adults, these are being used as a gateway out of cigarettes.
But the ads are incredibly glamorous. They say smoking is cool. Any kind of smoking is cool, essentially.
But I don't think that's the effect they're having. I mean, what we're talking about here is relative risk, harm reduction. We mustn't make the best the enemy of the good. The way smoking is declining slowly under, prescriptive from doctors and so on. But this could accelerate the decline, and I think we should encourage technologies that accelerate the decline.
Just before we finish, I just want to turn to the story of a possible tax on sugar. Matt Ridley, sugar is an addiction. We've got a problem with type 2 diabetes. There's a proposal now for a tax on sugar. Is it a good idea?
No, I think it's a mistake. I don't think we should be micromanaging people's diets. People should be left to make up their own minds about these things. And taxes are not about how we micromanage what people do. We should use taxes to raise money.
But social engineering is actually sometimes for the good, surely. I mean, therefore people are actually encouraged in certain ways to take less sugar.
Indeed, but it's not you can't pick this out as sort of one thing and say taxing it's the right way to do it. I think we should leave people to make up their own minds, and we should raise taxes to spend on public services. That should be how you do taxing. Taxing shouldn't be about how to encourage or discourage particular things.
Well, e-cigarettes and sugar, thank you both very much for joining us tonight.